The knock landed in the deepest hours of Vancouver winter. The hallway outside Adam Patel's condo, painted in thin blue police light, and rain so cold it felt like warning. What started as love, coated in midnight chats and promises of belonging, ended with paramedics pushing past spilled wedding albums, officers taping off a doorway through which everything Adam owned, believed, or dreamed of was about to unravel. Adam was never the reckless type. The son of Gujarati immigrants, he'd built every risk into a spreadsheet. Career moves, city changes, even his private hopes of building a family. At 36, after a decade adrift in the city's tech world, his mother's gentle insistence that he try just one more site led him to Desimalan, a South Asian matrimonial portal where hopes flickered behind curated profiles. There he met Neha Sharma, a literature tutor from Pune. Their first messages were careful but curious. By the 10th, emojis tumbled into LOLs, calls stretched for hours, and the ache of loneliness found a temporary easing in shared nostalgia for homemade food and Bollywood music on rainy nights. The chats grew into video calls, Neha, shawled and smiling, against a humming Mumbai backdrop, showing Adam her small dog, her battered copy of The God of Small Things, and sometimes a glimpse of her frail mother hovering off camera. She joked about Canadian winters and practiced, until Adam's heart fluttered. On her birthday, he sent flowers. For Christmas, a box of cookies and a note. For our new tradition. She laughed. Only you would send shortbread to India, and asked him, seriously, if he'd ever truly felt at home. After 3 months, Neha confessed her dream of living in Canada, weary of endless family expectations and city chaos. Adam, too, wanted a fresh start. When visa costs and failed bank transfers turned up, he offered help. Small at first, $300 for paperwork, another $900 for a travel agency's emergency fee, but the expenses multiplied. Neha called in tears. Her mother's illness, an uncle's business debt, hospital bills, tickets she couldn't buy on her own. Adam wired money, trusting and desperate to smooth her journey west. Mid-January, Neha landed in Vancouver. Adam met her at arrivals, hands shaking with nerves. She was taller, more serious than her selfies, but her smile was warmth itself. She marveled at the snow and hugged him tightly, as if trying to convince them both this was real. They married in a whirlwind, civil vows, a reception in Burnaby lit with gold saris and LED candles, and WhatsApp blessings from relatives in India and Brampton. The cost was staggering, but Adam told himself it was a small price for family. Within weeks, their tiny condo filled with reminders of a new life. Neha's textbooks and hairbands beside his keyboard. Good luck charms on the fridge, 2 mugs that said home. But routine frayed. Neha kept odd hours, leaving for tutoring in the evenings, her stories inconsistent. Phone calls in rapid Hindi crackled behind the bathroom door. Whenever Adam asked about money, she wept. You don't know the pressure, the fear of a new country. And always, another request came. Sending cash to family, covering a mysterious debt, quietly wiring $7,000 marked urgent. Adam's friends grew suspicious. Do you really know her? His best friend asked after a lunch where Neha spent most of the time texting. Adam ignored it. Love, he reasoned, was about faith when reality became uncertain. Still, late at night, while Neha slept with her phone tight under the pillow, Adam scrolled her social media. He found a second profile, Neha Kumari. Same face, new last name, engaged to someone named Dhruv. Hundreds of friends who didn't overlap with anything she told him. Adam confronted Neha. Her response was a hurricane. Anger, then sobs, then freezing silence. If you wanted to destroy what we have, you've done it. Things fell apart in August. Adam's account flagged a $15,000 transfer to an unknown name. Neha said it was for her cousin's university fees. She said, being a good daughter. Adam insisted on seeing proof. That night Neha left, returning only after midnight, refusing to speak. In the quiet, tension pressed Adam's chest until he could barely breathe. 3 weeks later, the knock came. The stranger stood shivering, holding a crumpled passport and a photograph. Neha, in red bridal attire, beside him in a crowded Mumbai temple. My name is Dhruv, the man said, voice shaking as much from exhaustion as grief. "She's married to me. And you. And maybe others." In halting English and Hindi, Adam pieced together the story. Neha had been married to Drew for 4 years, sending him money for their future in Canada. The photos, financial trails, WhatsApp logs, it all came tumbling out. Parallel lives, exploited hope, thousands vanishing from both men, each believing they were unique. That confrontation, fueled by disbelief and rage, erupted into violence. The walls of Adam's condo bore witness to shouts, shattering glass, and blood droplets spattered on laminate flooring. The neighbors called police. Paramedics arrived, guiding 3 broken people into separate ambulances. In the sterile light of dawn, investigators found more. Neha's laptop brimming with scripts for scams, records of payments from men across North America, Photoshop documents, marriage visas in varying names. She, it turned out, wasn't acting alone. Her calls linked to a network in Mumbai and Dubai, where similar operations targeted vulnerable men dreaming of love and family abroad. Adam, stitched and silent, sat in an interview room and tried to remember who he was before Neha's first message. Drew, too, was left adrift, his years of waiting revealed as just one thread in a tapestry built of loneliness and lies. The story would spill into headlines: 30-plus victims, millions lost, an international crime syndicate exposed. But in Adam's heart, what stung most wasn't the dollars vanished or even the public humiliation. It was that, in a world aching to believe in connection, someone could weaponize hope so ruthlessly and only be revealed when the facade was finally shattered by a knock in the night. And so, for everyone who assumes heartbreak is the end of a story, remember, sometimes it's only the beginning. The neighborhood in Richmond seemed quieter in the weeks that followed. The hallway outside Adam Patel's condo still stained faintly where police tape once fluttered, the mailboxes stuffed with letters that would never be opened. Everything about the space felt altered, like the world had shuffled just out of alignment. Yet for Adam, what shifted most wasn't the beat of the city or the frozen stares of neighbors. It was the slow, choking realization that the love he'd waited his whole life for was never real. After the ambulance lights faded, Adam spent hours in a hospital waiting room, his hands stitched and bandaged, replaying every detail of the past year. Officers came and went, offering tea. Then cold questions. How did you meet? When did you last feel something was wrong? Did you ever see your passport? Adam tried to answer, but each syllable stuck in his throat. He didn't know if he was a victim or a fool, and the difference gnawed at him. Investigators combed through the chaos left behind. Neha, now known to police as both Neha Sharma and Neha Kumari, remained almost silent during her interviews. She refused to meet Adam's eyes. To the detectives, she spun stories of pressure and desperation. Family debts, promises made and broken across continents, the dangers a woman faces alone in a new country. But her laptop told another tale. Inside, a digital ledger chronicled every lie. Dozens of incoming wires from men with Canadian, American, and Australian addresses, money sent to accounts in Mumbai and Dubai, and scripts, literal playbooks, for everything from first video call to emergency deposit request. There were other names too: fake uncles, ghost cousins, WhatsApp numbers marked safe/Canada only, and emergency/Mumbai family. Drew, the man at Adam's door, spent 3 days in a low-rent motel, his own dreams shattered. The 2 men pieced together timelines. There had been money sent for visas nearly every month, photographs of wedding ceremonies staged for bureaucracy and blended for emotion, video calls where Neha toggled between families, never betraying anything. She was an artist of isolation, her real self shielded between stories, her real plans hidden under everyday affection. The press swept in quickly, local stories labeling it the Richmond matrimony scam, then national headlines about a growing epidemic, international marriage fraud, where loneliness was worth more than any dowry. Victims called the police in waves. Some had only lost a few hundred, their hearts bruised. Others, like Adam, counted tens of thousands gone. Entire retirement accounts bled for love that arrived wrapped in bureaucracy and longing. A Calgary man, a Sydney doctor, a recently divorced Toronto chef. All describe a woman whose details shifted slightly, but whose affection was just as hungry, just as meticulously rehearsed. Adam became a reluctant centerpiece in the investigation. Hours of describing every message, every payment, letting detectives map his WhatsApp threads against Neha's emails, walking them through the gut punch of realizing that what he called memories were actually blueprints for a con. Bank statements revealed he'd sent over $120,000 in just under a year, to insurance brokers, to medical contacts, to a Dubai cousin who, police later confirmed, did not exist. Even the wedding gifts, the gold jewelry purchased for Neha's family, had already been resold, funds neatly traced back to shell accounts overseas. Yet what hurt most were the little betrayals. Each time Neha had said, "I love you," on a dark winter night, her fingertips already typing, "We'll send birthday funds tomorrow," to someone else. The comfort Adam felt when she tucked herself beneath his arm, her heart thundering, or so he thought, while she lined up lies on other screens. Whatever justice the investigators sought, Adam knew there was no restitution for time, hope, or the parts of himself he'd scattered to make someone else whole. Community groups in Vancouver were shaken too. At local temples and gurdwaras, meetings turned to warnings. How do you spot a scam that looks, sounds, and smiles like family? Immigration lawyers ran workshops, counseling sessions overflowed, and at least a dozen men reported nearly identical experiences. A cousin in Brampton, a sick mother in Delhi, always money, always secrecy, always guilt. Meanwhile, Neha awaited her hearing. Lawyers floated the narrative that she was herself a victim, indebted to predatory networks, manipulated by overseas criminal rings, and cornered by the failures of immigration policy. But the evidence was relentless. Files cross-checked identities. Financial flows charted like a heist movie. Detectives prepared cases across 3 countries, connecting not just Neha but a network of handlers, facilitators, and accomplices funneling millions out of North America, with a whisper and a vow. Drew and Adam met one last time before the first court date, hunched on plastic chairs outside a courtroom. They didn't say much, just the silence of 2 men who'd both loved a ghost. Richmond tried to move on, but traces lingered in every newsstand, every support group, every uncertain swipe on a matrimonial app. Adam's wounds crusted over, his hands healing, his heart less so. He changed his passwords, closed joint accounts, and tried to reclaim his quiet life. Sometimes, in the hush before sleep, he'd hear Neha's laughter in the kitchen, the memory so vivid it ached. The case, now dubbed Canada's deadliest marriage conspiracy, would explode further in the months to come. New arrests, new victims, and courtroom revelations that stunned the city. But for Adam Patel, the cruelest lesson was simple. Love had been weaponized, and trust, once lost, was the hardest thing in the world to rebuild. The shockwaves from the Richmond marriage scam did not fade quickly. Instead, they widened, drawing in not just Adam Patel and Drew, but entire communities and law enforcement agencies across multiple continents. Adam's world felt frozen in place. Reporters gathered daily outside his building, hoping for a quote from the software engineer at the heart of Canada's deadliest marriage con. Friends who once envied his whirlwind love story now whispered about his naivety. At work, HR quietly asked if he needed time off. On the news, immigration officials fielded questions about how such a complex web of fraud could flourish under their noses. Meanwhile, the police investigation gathered steam. Richmond RCMP, working with immigration authorities and banking investigators, meticulously pieced together the scheme. It became clear that Neha wasn't just operating alone. The clues in her laptop, dozens of bank accounts, email trails leading to obscure IT firms in Mumbai and shell companies in Dubai, scripts for onboarding new grooms, playbooks for wedding call staging, pointed to a criminal network that specialized in weaponizing loneliness for profit. Wire transfers totaling more than $3.8 million stretched from Vancouver to Melbourne to Toronto, funneled through glitzy wedding ceremonies and the eternal promise of love and belonging. Drew, convalescing in a shelter with the help of local Indian community leaders, recounted his ordeal for police and the press. He believed he was building a future in Canada, a plan Neha sold him day after day via video calls and legal paperwork. but watched as every rupee he saved vanished in emergency fees and false promises. Other men came forward. A Calgary businessman shaken by the realization he'd paid more into visa fees than his actual marriage, a New Jersey dentist, a Sydney engineer, each one drawling out devastatingly similar stories. "She told me I saved her," one victim recalled through tears. But really, she was saving herself, at our expense. The fallout stretched into community halls. Local temples and support groups organized seminars on spotting red flags in cross-border relationships. Immigration lawyers struggled to manage the deluge of consultations. Men and, in some cases, women spoke of being pressured for money and paperwork by relatives they never met in person. At least a dozen other victims in Vancouver filed police reports. Stories of brief, glare-filled romance, followed by a landslide of financial requests and emotional manipulation. The Canadian Border Services Agency reveled in a rare breakthrough. For once, their collaboration with Indian police led to real results. A raid in Pune uncovered a call center staffed with young women trained to launch and manage multiple marriages at a time. The scripts recovered matched word for word those on Neha's hard drive. In Delhi, police shut down 2 travel agencies specializing in visa facilitation for this kind of matrimonial fraud. Through all of this, Adam focused on survival. His hands slowly healed, but the restlessness in his chest didn't fade. He testified for hours, sometimes in tears, sometimes clenching his jaw in anger, about the money lost, the gaslighting, the quiet sense of relief that came with knowing this nightmare wasn't his fault alone. Neha, meanwhile, awaited trial in custody. Her lawyer argued she was another victim, coerced into crime by poverty and greater forces, claiming men like Adam were willing participants in love for sale across borders. But the evidence was overwhelming. Photos, video recordings of staged ceremonies, wire logs, and confessions from lower-level accomplices in India. The media dubbed it Canada's darkest marriage conspiracy. The case reignited controversy over immigration, online dating, and the fine line between love and exploitation. Editorials called for stricter vetting, tougher penalties, and better support for victims, while others warned against turning every cross-border romance into an object of suspicion. As national attention peaked, Adam made a quiet, necessary decision. He would not let his suffering define him. He joined a support group for victims of romance and marriage fraud, sharing his experience and listening as a room full of strangers wept at their own echoes. With police support, he even helped design a new public awareness campaign, Love Without Loss, educating others about the warning signs he'd missed. If nothing else, he hoped his heartbreak would protect someone else from the same fate. The criminal network Neha belonged to ultimately faced dozens of indictments. New policies rolled out, requiring more rigorous background checks for spousal sponsorship and better cross-checking of matrimonial visas, a direct result of the case that destroyed Adam's sense of safety, but gave a community a jolt of overdue honesty. In many ways, though, healing was slow. Every wedding photograph, every anniversary card tucked in a drawer stung like a wound freshly opened. But in time, Adam learned to see himself not as a victim, but as someone still capable of hope, wiser perhaps, and forever changed, but not destroyed. And on warm spring evenings in Vancouver, if Adam caught the laughter of neighbors drifting through a rain-washed window, he would remind himself, trust is fragile, love can be deadly, but recovery, real, aching, difficult recovery, is always possible for those willing to face the truth. The courtroom in downtown Vancouver was packed well beyond capacity. Cameras jostled for views, reporters whispered for scoops, and the air thickened with tension. Adam Patel took a deep breath as his name was called, stepping forward not as a victim, but as a witness, a man demanding justice for a truth that had nearly destroyed him. The judge presided over a case that had become Canada's largest international marriage fraud trial. At its center was Neha Sharma, real name Radhika Kulkarni, facing charges of fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy. Prosecutors meticulously unveiled layers of deception: fake wedding ceremonies, forged documents, multiple husbands across continents, and a network of accomplices managing strings from India to Canada, the US, and Australia. Adam's testimony was raw. He recounted the flood of emotions: hope, love, confusion, betrayal, and the crushing financial loss exceeding $120,000. He told the jury how trust had been weaponized, how every promise was a lie wrapped in affection, and how the scars of deception ran deeper than money. "She used our hopes," he said quietly, "and for years, I was just a name on a ledger." Meanwhile, Detective Sarah Lee detailed the painstaking investigation. She described digital forensics, tracing thousands of dollars funneled through shell corporations, interviews with 31 additional victims from 3 countries, and cooperation with international police. "This was not just a woman acting alone," she said. "This was a sophisticated criminal enterprise exploiting immigration systems and loneliness alike." The defense tried to paint Neha as a desperate woman crushed by poverty and familial pressure, manipulated into terrible choices. They argued many of the transactions were loans never intended to be repaid. But the prosecution countered with damning evidence: voice-recorded admissions, detailed financial plans labeled sweetheart accounts, and photographs showing multiple staged marriages, evidence that shattered any claim of innocence. Outside the courtroom, the impact rippled through communities. Support groups, once scattered and secretive, mobilized into a powerful network. The media spotlighted the vulnerability of immigrant men, many isolated by culture and fear, preyed upon by slick fraudsters promising love abroad. Activists pressured lawmakers to toughen spousal sponsorship rules and increase funding for cultural outreach programs. At Vancouver City Hall, a panel of experts convened to discuss reforms. Representatives from immigration services, police, and South Asian community leaders brainstormed improvements to screening and education. A pilot program was approved: workshops for international students and new immigrants about risks of online romance and financial exploitation. Meanwhile, Adam and Drew met quietly several times. Both had lost years, money, and pieces of their dignity, but they found strength in shared experiences and the collective call for justice. They gave interviews, participated in awareness campaigns, and pledged to help others recognize the warning signs they had missed. Neha's trial stretched months. Months filled with legal battles, sometimes heated exchanges, occasionally moments of muted remorse. But the scales tipped decisively on hard evidence. As verdict day approached, the country held its breath, not just for Adam or Drew, but for every victim whose story had finally been told. When the gavel finally came down, it was a resonant moment. Guilty on multiple counts, including fraud, conspiracy, and identity theft. The judge's sentence was stern but fair: several years in prison, restitution orders, and a lifetime ban on sponsorship activities. Beyond punishment, the ruling acknowledged the impact of emotional and psychological abuse, rare for immigration-related fraud cases. For the men whose lives have been shattered, the verdict was bittersweet. Money would never be fully recovered. Trust would always carry cracks. But the public recognition offered a measure of closure. Their ordeal was a lesson shouted from the rooftops, a warning etched into community conversations that would echo for years. In the months following, news emerged that investigators had identified more accomplices in India, arrested at travel agencies, and in offices specializing in falsified visas and documents. Global authorities tightened cooperation, exchanging data faster and cross-referencing matrimonial databases with immigration records. The Richmond matrimony scam became a benchmark case, forcing governments to face the human cost of ignoring scams hidden under cultural tradition and digital anonymity. For Adam, life moved forward cautiously. He changed jobs, moved to a quieter neighborhood, and found solace in community support groups. Slowly, he allowed himself hope, not like before, naive and eager, but steady and guarded. Healing was imperfect, but real. And if you walk past that high-rise today, beneath the shimmer of city lights, you'd hear whispers of a cautionary tale, a story not of lost love, but lost illusions. The truth behind the happy wedding photo, the double lives, and the hearts stolen across oceans. Because sometimes the deadliest cons aren't the ones that yell. They're the ones wrapped in the softest words. The courtroom was cloaked in silence, as the judge prepared to read the sentence that had gripped an entire nation. Months of painful testimonies, revealing the chilling scope of a marriage fraud network that stretched from Canada to India, the United States, and Australia, had finally reached their end. For Adam Patel, Dhruv Gupta, and the 31 other victims whose voices had echoed through the halls of justice, this moment was both years overdue and searingly poignant. Neha Sharma, whose real name was revealed to be Radhika Kulkarni, sat stoic behind the glass, hands cuffed, her face a mask of calm that masked the ripple of consequences to come. The courtroom held a collective breath as the judge detailed the charges and the ruling. Guilty on multiple counts: fraud, conspiracy, identity theft, and the emotional abuse that had devastated dozens of lives. The sentence was harsh, but measured. Years behind bars, ordered restitution of hundreds of thousands of dollars. Though, as many knew, the money might never be fully recovered. Lifetime bans from sponsoring immigrants. And most importantly, an official acknowledgement that this web of lies had weaponized loneliness, culture, and trust for profit and control. Adam listened, heart heavy, but finally able to release some of the weight he'd carried for so long. He thought of Neha's fake smiles, the carefully staged weddings, the string of false promises. But more than anger, there was relief. Justice had been served for now. Dhruv, sitting across the room, allowed himself a small nod. He had lost years waiting for a future that never came. The man who had shared Neha's life in India, only to learn hers was a mosaic of deception. Together, these men had become symbols for all those caught in similar schemes, their stories shining a light on a shadow too long ignored. Outside, the community reacted with a mix of sorrow and determination. Neha's trial had brought greater awareness to the risks faced by immigrants navigating complex legal systems while chasing love and belonging. Local organizations mobilized, launching campaigns to educate newcomers about fraud, to provide safe spaces for victims, and to push for reforms in immigration policies. Vancouver City Hall announced new programs: partnership workshops with South Asian cultural centers, enhanced liaison officers embedded in immigrant communities, and expanded legal aid for suspected fraud victims. The government pledged better cross-border cooperation aimed at dismantling criminal networks exploiting immigration laws worldwide. Meanwhile, police investigations continued abroad. Arrests in Mumbai and Dubai disrupted supporting layers of the scam, revealing a sophisticated operation managing identities, documents, and money transfers with ruthless precision. Authorities estimated that the criminal network had netted over $3.7 million from more than 30 innocent men. Their hopes for love turned to currency in a global con. For Adam, life after the verdict was a delicate balance of healing and advocacy. He left his job briefly to speak at community events, warning others, sharing his story, not as a cautionary tale of shame, but a beacon of vigilance and resilience. His relationship with Dhruv evolved from strangers to reluctant allies, bound by shared trauma, but also by a hope that their experience might protect someone else. Yet amid all the progress, the scars remained. The wedding albums stored away in a box, the quiet apartment where echoes of betrayal lingered, the financial ruin that no court verdict could erase. Adam understood one simple truth: sometimes, survival was an act of rebuilding from the ruins of faith. In those moments of quiet reflection, he often thought about the woman who had been both reluctant victim and mastermind. What had driven Neha to live a life so fractured? The pressure of family? Poverty? Desperation? The answers were complicated, layered like the relationships she had spun. But for the men she deceived, the answer was clear. They had been betrayed by someone they trusted, and it had nearly cost them everything. The Richmond matrimony scam became more than a headline. It became a catalyst. Laws were amended, immigrant support systems strengthened, and public discourse shifted toward protecting those most vulnerable. Importantly, it sparked a global conversation about how loneliness can be exploited, and how love, when disguised as a contract, can be used as a weapon. If you find yourself navigating the complex world of online romance or cross-border relationships, remember Adam and the countless others who learned the hard way. Trust quietly, but verify boldly. And in Canada's multicultural tapestry, where new beginnings are woven every day. Their story stands as both warning and call to protect the hopes of those chasing dreams on distant shores.